Maseches Nedarim Daf begins with a Mishnah, contains 3 Mishnahs in all. It's talking about terms that are used for Nedarim, where you have one thing that is within another, it's a subcategory of another. So if you refer to the larger category, you include the smaller potentially, while if you refer to the smaller, you don't include the larger category. So the 3 things which we will discuss are a house. Does that include an upper floor? The bed, does that include something called a dargash? And a city, does that include the expanded zone around the city? We'll also talk about the house, whether that includes the doorway as part of the discussion of the city. So let's begin. The first Mishnah discusses if somebody says he's making Isser Hana on his house or on a house, does that include the upper floor? So the Mishnah says the Mechalek between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says it does not include the upper floor. The term bayis, meaning house, means the lower floor. It cannot be used to refer to the upper floor. The Chachamim say no. The general term bayis could refer to the lower floor, but it could also refer to the entire house, and therefore we assume that it refers to the entire house, including the upper floor. However, if it says aliyah, which is a word that means the upper floor, that most definitely does not refer to the lower floor. It's a term that only means the upper floor. All right, now the Gemara begins. The Gemara is going to bring a brisa and a statement of an Amayra. The Gemara is going to try to say on each one of them, do they fit with the Chachamim and Rabbi Meir, or do they only fit with one opinion? So first we have a brisa. The brisa has a limud in a pasuk about tzaras that it includes the upper floor. So the pasuk says, "V'nasati nega tzaras beveis eretz achuzaschem." The brisa makes a drasha. Beveis is to include 2 things. It's to include the porch outside the house, and it's also to include the upper floor. So the Gemara says this has to be Rabbi Meir, because according to the Chachamim, the upper floor is always included in the term bayis. Why do I need a special pasuk to teach me beveis to include the upper floor? It should be automatically included because that's what the word means. So the Gemara says no. This could even be the opinion of the Chachamim, even though generally the word bayis includes the upper floor. Here I would think that it does not, because it says beveis eretz achuzaschem. It links it to the ground. It has to be something that's on ground level. Therefore, the phrase beveis is to include that it's not daf ground level. It includes the upper floor as well. That was Abaye's answer. Now the Gemara brings a statement of an Amar. The Gemara wants to know who it fits like. So the Amar is Rafuna Bar Chia. He says the name of Ula. If somebody says, I'm selling you the house of my house, I'm selling you Veis Bevesi, a house in my house. So then he can say that I was referring to the upper floor. If they seal the deal without specifying, he can say I was referring to the upper floor, that's what I sold you. So the Gemara says clearly the implication is only if he says bias shebevesi can he refer to the upper floor. If he just says bias, he can't refer to the upper floor. So you see, the term bias does not refer to the upper floor. That must be Rabbi Meir's opinion. The Chachamim would say bias could refer to the upper floor. The Gemara says no, this could even be the Chachamim. When we say that he sold him the aliyah, we don't mean the upper floor. When the statement here, paskins, he could say, solely the aliyah, he could mean the me'ula shebebayis, he could mean the best part of the house, which actually refers to the lower floor. That's the only thing that he could tell him that he was referring to, because that's what the term bayis shebevatim means. So that term actually is different than the term bias. The term bias, according to Cham's opinion here, would mean the entire house, any part of the house. But here we said bias, shebebesi, that refers to the lower bedafka and not the upper. This takes us to the next Mishnah, which discusses the halacha of a bed. So there's the general term of a bed is a bed which is not meant to be folded up. It is a wooden frame and has a layer of leather stretched across it. It's not collapsible. It's fixed in. You can't remove the layer and you can't take the legs apart without destroying the bed. However, there's something that's called a dargash, and the Gemara is going to spend most of the discussion identifying what a dargash is. So again, we have a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. If somebody says he has Esser Hana on a bed, Rabbi Meir says that does not include a dargash. A dargash is not called a bed. The Chacham say no, a dargash is included in the term of a bed, and therefore the Isser applies to the dargash as well. If, however, somebody says the dargash, that is a specific term and does not refer to other beds that are not a dargash. So where it begins, the Gemara wants to know what's a dargash. So Ula says a dargash is a thing which looks like a bed, but it's not meant for sleeping on. It's actually a bed for good mazel. people used to keep a bed in their house, which they wouldn't sleep on. Just having a bed there as an extra bed was something that brought good mazel to the house. So now the Gemara has kashas on it. The Gemara is going to try to figure out what actually the kasha is, because we have a few different versions of the kasha, and in the beginning they don't seem to hold up. So the Gemara's first version of the kasha is that the Rabbanan said to Ula, we have a Mishnah that says that when the Kohen Gadol, or the king, would be in Avel, they would bring him a Sudas Havra, they would bring him food to eat in his Avelis, and then he would sit on the Dargash, and everyone else would sit on the floor. So if the Dargash is a bed that's never sat on, why would he sit on it during Sudas Havra? So obviously, it can't refer to a bed that people never used to sit on or to sleep on. So the Gemara says that's not a kasha. It could very likely be that it is sat on only this time, not any other time. And that's because in the Sudas Havra, you make him drink wine and you make him eat meat. You don't make him do that any other time. He can eat whatever he wants. Obviously, the rules here are different, and perhaps we want him to sit on the Dargash specifically for a certain reason when he is in Avela. So that's not a good kasha. So therefore, the Gemara says, what exactly was the kasha? So the Gemara therefore says, and this is Ravina saying, if we ask the kasha must be from the following brisa. In the halachos of Avelus, we know that you have to turn a bed upside down. It has to be turned over or stood up so that it's not ready to be used to sit on in a normal manner. So we have a brisa that says the Dargash does not have to be turned over. It just has to be stood up on the side. Now, if it's a bed that was left aside for good mazel, so why should it not be turned over like anything else? It's a very hush of a bed. As a matter of fact, we have halacha, we have a brisa that says clearly that when somebody turns over the bed because of avelos, it's not only his own bed that he sleeps in, it's all the beds in the house. So this thing's a bed, according to our understanding that it's a bed for good luck. So why shouldn't it be used to turn over? So therefore, it must not be a bed, it must be some other type of device. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a kasha either. Because a bed which people don't sleep on, you don't have to turn over. A bed which is used to hold kalim, you don't have to have a brisa that says if somebody has a bed that was used for kalim, not for sleeping, does not have to turn that over. So therefore, the Gemara says we're still looking for what the kasha is on this pshat, that the Dargash is the bed that is left empty for good mazel. So the Gemara therefore says the kasha must be from a different brisa. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, as part of Avelis, you don't have to turn the Dargash over, you just have to untie the straps or undo the hooks, and it falls by itself. What this means is that the way the Dargash was collapsible, it was made in a frame with legs, with a sheet of cloth or leather stretched between it, and it was attached to the frame through straps or hooks. And those straps or hooks could be undone pretty easily. It was meant to be taken apart. So one doesn't have to turn the bed upside down, actually turn the frame upside down. All one has to do is untie the straps. The cloth that's stretched across it will then fall, and that counts as avelis. So that's what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says is what you do with the Dargash. The problem is that the bed that's left for good luck, for good mazel, does not have straps and doesn't have hooks. So therefore, it cannot possibly be referring to the Dargash. So this is the Gemara's accepted kasha, and this is why the Dargash must not be this bed that's left aside for mazel. It must be something else. So the Gemara now looks for another explanation as to what the Dargash is. And this is when Rovin came. He says, I asked all of the Chachamim and Rav Tachlifa Bar Marava, that's who I was asking, and he frequented the marketplace of Tzali, and he told me that the Dargash is actually a bed made out of leather. And by this he meant the collapsible bed which can be taken apart, and it can be easily undone, the straps can be untied, or the hooks can be undone. Right, now the Gemara brings another sugya on the topic. The Gemara says we had a discussion, what's the difference between a bed and a Dargash? Rabbi Yirmiyah said, the bed, the sheet folded over the frame of the bed and covered it up. The Dargash, there were holes in the frame, and there were straps or hooks that went through the holes that you tied on the other side. So Gemara says, well, we have a kasha on that. We have a kasha that says, what is the point at which the fashioning of the bed or the dargash is considered complete. Completeness is important to know because once something is completed, it's ready to be makabel tuma. Before it's complete, it's not makabel tuma. So we say that any wood kli is makabel tuma from when it's finished. So for the bed or a cradle, it's from when it's smoothed over, when it's rubbed with the skin of a fish to give it a polish and to give it a shine. So now if a bed is covered, if the frame is covered with the cloth, like you're saying, the cloth wraps around the bed frame, why would you shine it? It's not seen at all. So that cannot be the correct identification of what a bed is as opposed to a dargash. So therefore, the Gemara says, no, both of them are tied through holes. But the way they're tied is different in the bed and the dargash. The bed, you have straps that go through the holes in the frame. You take two different straps, went through two different holes, they meet on the outside of the frame, and you tie them there. Those are harder to undo. The dargash is not tied with straps. There are hooks, and the hooks are simply hooked onto the frame or from the frame to the sheet, and that's what holds them in place, and you can simply unhook them, and that's easy. Now the Gemara just brings another halacha. Rav Yaakov says the name of it, Rebbe, that sometimes you had a bed that had two vertical poles extending upward, one in the center of the headboard, one in the center of the footboard. Those poles stuck up, and then there was a cross beam strung between the two, and there was a tent kind of made over that. That's something called kilas chasanim. So if you have those two beams that stick up, how is the one supposed to turn the bed upside down when one has a velas? You can't. The beams are in the way. So what you do is you just stand it up on the side. Now, Yaakov Bar Idi says that Rabbi Shua ben Levi the halacha is like Rosh Shimon ben Gamliel, who said for the dargash you just untie the rings and you untie the straps, and that's it. It falls. You don't need to turn it over at all. We now get to the next and last Mishnah, which talks about if someone makes an Isser Hana on a city or on a house. So on the city, what is included? So the entire city itself is included, but there are two layers around the city. One layer is what's called Ibura Shel Ir. That is a zone around the outside of the city, 70 and 1/3 amos thick. Some of the Rishonim here mention it's when there is a niche in the border of the city where it sticks in or sticks out of a straight line, but that's not how most Rishonim learn. Those are included as part of the city. Now, there's the Tchum, that's 2,000 amos past that, past the city walls and past any houses that are within the Ibura. So the Tchum is not counted as part of the city. Here, there's no machokas. Somebody asers the city, the Tchum is mutter, and the Ibura Shalir, the 71/3 amos is aser. Now, what about a house? What's considered to be the house as far as the door is concerned? So the Mishnah says the house extends up until where the door meets the wall. The door is swung on the inside of the threshold, so the threshold itself is considered outside the house, and that's not aser as part of the house. All right, the Gemara begins. The Gemara wants to know, how do you know that the Ibura counts as part of the city? So Rabbi Yochanan says there's a pasuk in Yeshua. It says V'hibiyas Yeshua b'Yericho. Yeshua was in Yericho. At that time, he was not in Yericho. Yericho, it says, was Segeras and Misugeras. It was sealed up. He was near Yericho, but he wasn't in it. So you see that by being within Ibur Shalir, it's considered like he was in the city itself. Says Gemara, maybe the Tchum should also be that way. After all, he was in the Tchum at that point. How do you know it was the Ibur? That was the point. Maybe it was the Tchum. Gemara says, no, it can't be, because the Torah specifically says in Bamidbar Umadoisem Michutz La'ir Espas Kema Alpayim Ba'ama. The 2,000 amos is called Chutz La'ir. The Tchum, which is 2,000 amos, is outside the city. All right, now as far as the house, so we had said that the threshold does not count as part of the house. It's considered to be outside the house. Whereas a kash on that from Hilchas Tzaras, where the Kohen has to leave the house and pronounce it a tameh. Where does he go? So we quote a brisa. The brisa says he goes out of the house. You would think that he can go far away to his own house and be matamed from there. That can't be, because the pasuk says al pesach habayis, has to go to the door of the house. So then you may think he could stand under the threshold. He could stand under the lintel, and he could be the time of the house there while he's standing in the doorway. So it says the brisa, he can't do that, because it says min habayis, he has to go completely out of the house, outside of the doorway. Now there he closes the door and he says that it is Tamei. Now the Bryce continues and says, but yeah, but if he went all the way home, or if he stood in the doorway, it works. If he's masgir, then he locks it up there, it works. That's because it says, his gear bias, that is a drasha to teach me that even a type of sealing which wasn't supposed to be done works. Anyway, the kasha over here is that clearly we are understanding that being in the doorway, being within the threshold, is considered to be just like he is inside the house. So obviously it has to go further out than that. So Gemara says, so the kasha is that is different than our Mishnah, which said that being in the doorway is mutter if he answered the house on himself. So it's not considered to be part of the house. The Gemara says, no, it's different in Hilchos Teras, because the Torah there says min habayis. He has to go out of the house. The extra expression there teaches me that he has to go significantly out of the house. He can't even be in the threshold, although it's not considered to be part of the house.